Mark, it's great to have you here in the Penthouse Suites. We really appreciate you coming up here to talk to us. We know that there's plenty of things going on here at the Charleston conference.
Oh yeah.
We're just glad that you're able to come by and chat. So we really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the chance. And I was up at 6:30 this morning to do the fun run. So you're right. There's a lot of competition for our time. So yeah, that's a favorite.
Speaking of having your time, you just finished a panel, right? You were just working on a panel entitled "The Changing Academic Book Market Landscape: What's Next?" And you guys were focusing on the dramatic changes that are going on in the book marketplace. And I'm just wondering, what do you think are the most disruptive of these changes?
Yeah, well, the most disruptive is hard to pick out or single out or identify. There's just so many changes out there. Ebooks, obviously, and that trying to develop a rational market for ebooks, the way they're packaged and sold and priced to schools. The whole Amazon and the Kindle, the iPad, and potential for Google to distribute the internet as an alternate source of information, and just the challenge that presents to long-form reading in general. The secondhand book market, pretty ugly from a publisher perspective, even though it might be a benefit from the consumer perspective. Certainly the student perspective. Keyword searching, we talked some about on the panel, and whether that, on the one hand, makes books more discoverable, but on the other hand, does that actually lead people to read books in totality as their authors intended, or are they just going in and pulling out something like it's an encyclopedia or a database? So it's I guess a little hard to focus on any one thing. I guess my sense would be just the cultural shift away from long form reading, to my mind, as a primary source for either education or recreation, really. I mean, there's just so many options and alternative ways to get smart or have fun. So
a lot of competition.
Yeah, really. So yeah, the poor book.
Well, Mark, what technologies do we need to be aware of, and what end user preferences are telling us about the future of the book market? What do you see?
Yeah, well, that's really not my area, and I mean, it's interesting that the user experience folks, the UX folks who are out there, increasingly in libraries as well as on the publishing side, have really not done a lot of work on that user reading experience in for the ebook, in the digital world. So I think it remains to be seen. There's just so much conflicting information about what students prefer, what recreational readers prefer. We love the Kindle on an airplane, we hate it on the beach, whatever. So I think you can pick whatever story you want now, and focus in on that. So this panel I was just on, there was a lot of talk about discovery. I think people are, really hoping that that's a driver for usage, better systems, better discovery. But I just don't. I just don't know. I think it's probably more of a cultural and economic issue to my mind than a technological issue. So,
what do you think are the main challenges that the new technology pose for us, and the difficulty in figuring out what user preferences are? What challenges do you think are there, and on the other side, or what opportunities?
Well, one of the challenges, I think, and again, it's not my area or my comfort zone exactly, so any sensible person's going to take this with a grain of salt, but it's just evolving so quickly. So a user makes an investment in a platform or a device or whatever, only to find 6 months later, a year later, that's been superseded, or they can't get books in a Mobi format. They can only get EPUBs formatted books or whatever. I mean, it really is just not a rational marketing space yet, or a stable marketing space. So I would guess most of us as consumers and as librarians are still pretty a sea as to where, trying to pick winners and losers going forward. And I think just right now, there are just, a lot of alternatives to select from. I assume eventually, like VHS and Beta and, and then Blu-ray comes along and no one ever heard of it when we were trying to compare. Eventually some of that will be sorted out. But right now, it just, it's just the war of all against all to emerge, as a industry leader in that space. So,
I know we struggle with what format to buy, what sort of device to buy. I mean, we struggle with it all the time, because you don't want to invest tens of thousands of dollars and then come up in 2 years later it's completely been superseded. How are all these challenges impacting publishers and vendors? Was the same kind of struggle for them, or?
Oh, I'm certain. I'm certain that it is for them. Obviously, I'm on the library side, and I know it's a real challenge for libraries. I mean, it's, so an individual. I mean, it's not a big deal if a library buys a $99 device, and then only to find out, in a year now, it's, that's no longer the primary platform or the most desirable. But to try to actually school or educate or direct an entire campus of 40 or 50,000 people and say, this is the way you access content, this is the way we're making books available, and then 6 months later you're back knocking on their door going, well, now the way we're doing this is this way or that way. So just all that upheaval and change in the marketplace, extremely difficult to navigate for users. On the publisher side, I guess, they probably are at least interested in messages from the market and, trying to figure out, well, how do we best serve customers and likely buyers. So on, some of them I'm sure are in a position to actually drive those decisions, but I think others are trying to get coherent and cogent input and messages, and those are hard to come by. I mean, I'm sure, if you had 10 focus groups at 10 different individuals each, you just walk away with 100 bits and pieces of advice. So, I do think it's just early days still.
Right, about the long-form reading. Do you think that scholarly monographs are still a viable form of scholarly communication?
I do, but I think they're one among many. Okay. I know there's a certain reverence, or we sort of, in the library world, we privilege the book, as a symbol of learnedness, and it's a part of the cultural heritage, and it has a certain reverence, and obviously the book still has a lot of value, at least in some segments of the population and for some purposes. But so does Twitter, and so do blogs, and so do video, and so do a whole lot of alternative ways that people can get educated these days, or find out about the world. And in fact, books really do drive us to history. It takes a long time to write them. It takes a long time to publish them and distribute them. They are almost always backward looking, where I can learn, about what's happening in with a downed Soviet or Russian airplane, in 10 different ways today in real time. So if I wait for a book on that, that's going to be a historical tome, and maybe, more accurate maybe, but for most of us, most of the time, currency is an issue, and books really suffer by comparison in that space.
I have actually a follow-up. Do you think open access monographs are a possibility, and would that change the dynamic a little bit?
Oh yeah, I definitely think they're a possibility, because the saleability of a book, the uptake or of a book is declining rapidly, and that's very concerning. And I just a week ago or so met with the AAUP, the University Press Board, and that's a universal concern there that libraries are buying fewer and fewer books. On the other hand, there's probably more pressure than ever on publishers to actually publish my book. There's more scholars, there's more output. You have an Asian market that's come online, and in a very big way. So they're probably getting two very different messages. We have quality research and quality scholarship we want to share in a book form. Please publish my book. And we're not so interested. We're a library, but we can't afford to do this anymore. Only 1% or 5% or 16% of our budget is committed to books now, and we're going to be pretty selective about that. So, probably not an easy time to be a publisher and be caught in the middle of that.
I know we've been noticing in our university selection that print is making a comeback. In terms of what the selectors are actually selecting, they're not, and the ebooks, which I thought would soar off into the stratosphere, have actually dropped, and it's a peculiar dynamic. I don't have any way to interpret that at this point. I wonder if it's a blip or what do you think?
Well, I probably don't think too much that's helpful. I saw there was an article in the Times just a couple of weeks ago, maybe September, about, ebook sales were down, print looked back up. That created a lot of buzz for a couple of weeks. And I think Forbes had an article going, you could, that study had so many biases because it was just looking at a segment of the market and larger publishers or whatever. So I wasn't interested enough to try to sort that out. But I guess I would say, it is hard for me to think that we're not on an upward trajectory for ebooks. Things that people can read on mobile devices, which are becoming more and more ubiquitous, and get around with them and have all this functionality of, now I'll listen to it because I'm in the car, and then when I get home I prefer to read it. Just lots and lots of benefits of that digital form of the book. So I guess I think that actually the ebook will actually emerge as the primary mode for it, but there's always fluctuation and ups and downs on a long term of the dissemination of innovation, I think is the phrase we used to use, where you have cutting edge folks and then early adopters and then the mainstream and then the laggards, that you may never get on board. So it won't go away. Definitely, print won't go away. I mean, it'll always be there as an alternative, but my sense is that over time, that ebook is going to become the sort of primary mode, especially in an educational setting. I'm, less sure of that in a recreational or leisure reading setting.
So you're kind of thinking that technology will get better, because I think it was something Jim O'Donnell said this morning. The technology just isn't there yet for ebook mass adoption, at least in scholarly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everyone complains about these platforms, and everyone, and whether it's textbooks, and students don't like them, they can't do this, they can't do that. You go, you can annotate, you can cut paste, yes, but then, the next thing I look at, I can't do any of that. So it's, I guess I do think, yes, the technology will evolve and get better, and, we can, on the library side, we'll complain endlessly that it's not all perfect today and now and all, but, it's not totally useless. It's just not obviously perfected, and I imagine it will move incrementally toward higher levels of utility. Okay. So maybe that's just naive optimism about the evolution of technology and how things change, but obviously was saying earlier that I ran this morning, and one of the guys I run with is Mitchell Davis, who's headquartered down here in North Carolina, and he's working on a reading platform that he thinks is more of a native reading experience than some of the more generic large scale platforms that are really intended for folks to read on a desktop computer. So you just know there are going to be smart people out there that are identify that problem and start working to solve it. So
another one of your interests is the young professional, in a sense the future of the profession, the library profession. In fact, I think you're going to be on a panel tomorrow, and a few young librarians will be there.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, what do you think you'll hear from them? What do you think you'll learn from them?
Well, I guess, I'm excited about that because, it's just nice to have an opportunity to hang out with the kids and, and see what they're up to. And I guess I'm thinking a little bit less about what we'll hear from them than what we'll feel about them. And I think actually we'll feel inspired and optimistic, and I think to some extent we'll marvel at just how poised they are at these early stages of their career, and how well educated they are, and how passionate they are about what they're doing. And it's not just librarians. There's 2 librarians and 2 people from the publishing side, and that was interesting to me because these are young folks that I've met along the way, and really you just can't paint them as white hats and black hats, or the forces of good and the forces of evil. They are all these are just smart, well-meaning folks. So one of the things I'm hoping is that these 4 people coming together will find some common ground, maybe better than their older, embittered, entrenched colleagues who have been, duking it out for years and really have a hard time sort of crossing those barriers between the library world and the especially commercial publishing world.
Well, to take up on that, I know we had a Neapolitan this morning that had startups.
Yes, I was at that session.
I was excited and inspired by these young folks.
Yeah.
I really was. I thought this is excellent. But it does bring me back to, you talk about entrepreneurship within the business sense, but how on earth do we get this into libraries?
Yeah, that is really, that is an interesting space for me, and I'm trying to, this year, think some about that. I guess, more generally, I do think libraries have a lot to learn from the business community. Now, I know most of my library colleagues don't believe that and don't agree, and it just seems like everyone thinks they can do marketing, and everyone thinks that they can do outreach, and everyone thinks that they can order carpet for the library or design signage or build a reference desk. There's just no bounds to what our colleagues think falls within their sphere of competence, and but they're probably a little more protective of their MLS credentials than other people outside encroaching on that. So I think that actually within the commercial publishing space, there's folks who have real expertise in actually marketing information products, in actually selling or building individual relationships like textbook sales around information products, all of which would be, I think, very beneficial for librarians to try to understand more and take advantage of and sort of see what they could learn. I also think those folks have better metrics for measuring success and failure. Sometimes it's
and
just
a built-in tolerance for failure, which we tend not to have.
Well, certainly in that startup discussion this morning, yes, in that level there is real tolerance. Now, in the more established levels, there's probably less tolerance for failure in terms of there are real consequences to real accountability and consequences for, not meeting expectations. So, angel investors or equity firms or outside folks who are putting money in, really expect a return on that investment, and if that's not there quarter by quarter, then they're sort of looking.
They want to know why.
Who's to blame? Yeah. So, and some people are, rightfully or wrongfully, that finger of fate points to some people. Libraries really don't have that. We don't have the measures, and we certainly don't have that culture of accountability that is, and maybe that's a good thing, but in some cases and ways it's probably not the great thing. But that way, really, your question was more about this entrepreneurship in libraries, and then I'm struggling with, I guess I just think that there's so, as in that panel you saw this morning, Civics was there, and and Biblio Labs was there, and I've had opportunities to interact with Google folks out in Mountain View and all. So many attractive opportunities for young people to move into a space that just seems so vibrant and where they would feel empowered, and have a real breadth of responsibilities, and that they kind of owned, and I'm just not sure that the most established publishing companies or the old line libraries and all, have necessarily embraced that, and we're, I guess, at risk of being in a bad position to compete.
I agree.
For for some of that younger, energetic talent that we'd all like to grab.
Do you think the more, I notice in a lot of the online systems that we're getting now, there's a higher degree of products, like the ebooks, we're getting a higher degree of user studies, a higher degree of information coming back on how and if this material that we've purchased is being used, and that, I think, will give a level of automatically create a level of accountability. Do you see that as well?
I definitely do, but I mean, we all talk about big data, and lots of us are looking at the the research output on our campus and saying, well, we can help manage big data, and and this is going to be important in the future, and business analytics, obviously, we understand it's important. I think libraries are have been slow to move, because actually I think what you need to do is aggregate data at scale, and manage it at scale. So for instance, the search data from one library, in the middle of the country somewhere, is not nearly as valuable as being able to look across 100 research libraries and aggregate that and really try to understand at a much more granular level what moves off the shelves, or what people are coming into, and what what's just sort of sitting there and languishing, and what some of those factors might be that are driving that. So I do think this is an opportunity. I think if we were a business culture, by now we would have figured out that we need, to really leverage millions and millions of data points that are available to us. So.
And that would require, in a sense, an entrepreneurial outlook to look into this and to expand your utilization of all this data and so on.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, if you, getting back to this notion of entrepreneurship in libraries, if you were hiring and you were looking for somebody to be an entrepreneurial librarian, what characteristics would you be looking for?
Wow, that's just a great question. I think it's probably the most important question, and I'm not sure, again, that our libraries are as thoughtful as they need to be. I know back in the day when Google was, they were counting the first 10 employees, the first 20. I was number 60 at Google, whatever. The founders, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, and others, were involved in every hiring decision and tried to stay involved, at the, we're at the point where they were at 1,000 and 2,000. Eventually the scale is just overwhelming. But it's a very intentional hiring process still. It's still a very big deal to give a job or get a job in some of those places. So, I think libraries actually could be giving more attention to what they're looking for. I would say they should probably have their best people that you're sort of trying to clone or emulate involved in that hiring, and see, can they recognize those traits that they bring that are exciting their colleagues and exciting their directors or their users. Can they recognize that perhaps better than a department head or someone who technically is the supervisor. Right. So but I got off track there. I guess I'd say passion is number one. I know that's not that's kind of a cliche or a throwaway, but folks that are in some way mission driven, they're actually trying to do something in the world. They're trying to have an impact, make a change, and that would be as true on the commercial side, I think, as on our in the educational space or in the library space. People that are curious, trying to understand user needs and problems, and what do those folks out there want, and listeners, and who can engage folks and really try to get your head around what are the hurdles that we should be trying to remove that are in the way of especially students, undergrads, graduate students, and all. I guess since we were just talking about data, that sort of analytical, something between being analytical and being creative, or maybe both, seem like just important traits in whatever space you're moving into. And a sort of unpopular theme that I've been hammering away at when I'm out talking in our libraries or writing stuff lately is I do believe in salespersonship. Being salesy to me is not a sin. Maybe charisma is a better word, but being able to persuade is really an important thing in almost any space that you're working in, and it's not always for evil ends.
No, and as you said, to be an effective salesperson, you have to have passion.
I think that's right.
You have to have a dynamic interest in what you're trying to sell.
That's right. And I think maybe since you referenced this panel tomorrow, that's the kind of thing. You just sort of, you kind of get swept up in some of these folks who are just, energetic and passionate and, eager to, get going and make a difference. And, that just seems like the best sales pitch of all, is that, you really do want to, help them achieve those ends and find a place where you can work with them to make this happen. Right. So,
if you were in Jack's chair or in my chair, what question would you ask yourself?
I think I think I've shared with you maybe that I'm sort of moving now toward a retirement date, which is closing down. So I'll be turning over the reins of my job in right the last day of February 29th this year. It's a leap day, and I guess the thing I struggle most with and puzzle most with after all these years is that question about the future of libraries and their roles. And I started out in collections, and I was at University of Michigan, and it was a place that had enough resources that you could essentially fill a loading dock a day with stuff that was coming from all over the world, and just move that stuff in en masse, and use, not used. The best, I used to say all but the very worst books were our targets. But, I'm just so convinced now that really that's just not the space to be playing in for the research libraries anymore, that it's just not about the stuff, that it's really about people actually in a position to help undergraduates in particular. I'm a little more dubious about that holy grail of we want to be research partners to our faculty, and I get the importance of research on our campuses, but it's just so unpredictable and it takes such high skill levels. I can see a much more secure, ongoing role in working in that undergraduate space and helping faculty improve their instructional mission, and in the course of that, helping students get a richer education and achieve their goals. I guess I do think libraries need to, especially the kind of research libraries I work with, need to be addressing that transition probably more aggressively than they are, although all of them are addressing it. They're all getting that service is now the most important.
User-focused.
Yes,
the library
definitely.
becomes a user-focused institution,
Right.
A collection focus, which we have been throughout most of our history. We've been
And
collecting.
user focus is by its nature both entrepreneurial and marketing
Absolutely.
at the same moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's almost a retail mentality. You say,
Yeah.
hey, we're a distributor. We're a point of distribution
Yeah.
here, and we want to be friendly, we want to be welcoming, we want to bring people in the door or attract them to our website and keep them there and, make it a useful, appealing experience. So, I think absolutely, that mindset, as opposed to, I don't want to trash NISO or whatever, but, just so much attention to the conversation among librarians about standards and preservation and metadata and, all that back office stuff, which I kind of get that we have a lot of stuff coming in those libraries and someone has to organize it. But at the end of the day, I really do think it's going to be those campus relationships that are going to drive our budgets and drive our future.
And what really will drive us is our humans,
Yes, that's
our people.
That's right.
And we have, I don't know if we've always been as careful about choosing people as we need, or we've chosen them for the wrong reasons. We've chosen them for an academic degree.
I totally agree. I mean, and in some places and in some roles, I mean, I do think that's useful, that sort of long resume, and, it shows us something, but it may not show us the things that may be most critical, which is that time and attention to some undergraduate's problem, making it through organic chemistry, or submitting their first literature paper, or getting I mean, that I think is ultimately very important, and just balancing.
Because you pointed out it's all about the relationships.
I do believe this, and I know I've said this a million times and written it a million times. So it's just, but I use the phrase that the library should be the cosmetic counter of the campus, and my follow-up to that is, it's not the stuff there. I mean, that cosmetic counters have prime space in most department stores. They're right by the door. They're big. They're bright. I mean, that's a lot of real estate. And I feel like that stuff could be gotten almost anywhere. You can get it at CVS. You can get it online. You can, so I think it's actually the makeovers and the people, and the attribution of expertise to those folks standing around those cosmetic counters, and their willingness to sit and work with someone on how to apply makeup and what colors to use, and and that is not I think it's a skill set that most folks, male or female, just feel insecure about, that they know how to do this well and right. So everyone wants to look their best. And yet, here's people that are going to give me that personal attention to do that. So I think it's a real driver, but it's more the relationship than the product.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you guys. This was really a nice opportunity, and I'll just say what probably everyone thinks. Wow, this Charleston conference is great.
Well,
It
we
is.
always love to.